Hello everybody, hope you all are doing good out there. In this video we are going to be taking a look at a small Case Stockman. Case has made a lot of Stockmans over the years. They've made them with square bolsters, round bolsters, 3-spring Stockmans, 2-spring Stockmans, long Stockmans, short Stockmans, wide Stockmans, thin Stockmans. There's been lots of Stockmans. In the current Case lineup as of 2025, this is the smallest Stockman you can get, and it has been that way for quite some time. Case used to make a Stockman called the 27 pattern that had rounded bolsters, but I don't not believe that they're making it at this current time. So this is going to be the smallest one you can get. So I'm going to adjust the camera here, and let's take a look at this little Stockman. It's a very good knife. Now, this is Case's 33 pattern, and they make both a penknife and a Stockman on this same frame. We will compare those two to each other here shortly. But for the moment, let's take a look at this particular knife. This one right here is interesting because this one is in maple. It's not unheard of for Case to make a knife in maple, but it's not the most common either. Case tends to stay with some kind of synthetic or some kind of bone. You can see this has some pretty wood on it. You see that middle pin there? You can see that line coming out of it. That's not a crack. It's just the coloration in the wood. You can see there. This is the 2-spring Stockman. It's not a 3-spring. So you're going to have 2 back springs, and you're going to have brass on all the sides of the back springs. I always like brass liners on a knife. That's a big plus in my opinion. Got your brass pins and your nickel silver bolsters and your maple handle. You're going to get 3 blades, as with most Stockmans. Your main blade is going to be this little clip point blade, and this is a nice looking little blade. I like the way it looks, and it also performs very well whenever you're cutting with it or whatever you're using it for. It does a real good job. I've never had any complaints with it at all. This one does have what Case calls their as-ground blade. And what the as-ground blade is that they haven't polished it to a mirror polish. They've left some texture on that. That used to be common with some of Schrade's knives also. Some people prefer that because it doesn't show scratches as bad, and it doesn't show fingerprints. Now, this little knife was actually made in 1992. It's very, very small on there, and I had to get a magnifying glass to see it. But you can see down on the very bottom there by the bolster it says 19 USA 92. Now there was, I think it's 4 years, 1990, 1991, 1992, and 1993. All of those years there, Case was putting this stamp on there, which is kind of interesting. I've got a 91, a 92, and a 93, but I'm still lacking a 1990 with this particular Tang stamp on it. But you can see on the top it says Case XX, Bradford, PA. And those were about the only years that Case ever put the actual year on the knife. Normally they've used the dot system at least since the 1970s. But that's your main blade right there. Your secondary blade is going to be a sheep's foot blade. Here you can see the number, 7333. Now, the 7 is a reference to the fact that this is a wood handle. The 3 is a reference to the fact that this is a 3-bladed knife. And then the 33 references the pattern itself, that it's a small Stockman. Now, this is a sheep's foot blade, and that's a very, very useful little blade right there. Anytime you're trying to cut into like a box or tape, that's a great blade, and it's a good length. It's big enough to do what you need to with it, and it feels good in the hand when you're holding it. That sheep's foot blade is certainly excellent on this little Stockman. Then your third and last blade, it's going to be a classic pin blade. It's about the shape of probably a spear point, would probably be the best way to say it. The tip's just about in the middle. But, again, it's a good, useful little blade. And you've got it there. Generally, on my Stockmans, I'll leave this small pin blade or spay blade, whichever one it has. I'll normally leave it just a little bit coarser than the other blades, and I'll use it for my harder use tasks. So let's measure this little knife. It's not very long. It's a small knife, that's for sure. You can see right there, 2 5/8 inches is all this is, 2 5/8 inches. And weight-wise, it's very light. It don't weigh much at all. 1.00 ounces. So my toothpicks are generally around. A small case toothpick is usually around 0.90 to 0.95. So this weighs a little more, but it's not as heavy as a peanut. A peanut weighs in at around 1.20 to 1.25. So let's compare this to a few other knives. The first knife we will compare this little Stockman to is the full-size case trapper. Now, if you're like me, I think that these handles look almost identical. But this trapper on the bottom is a chestnut bone, and this one is maple wood. But just the way that it looks, they look very, very similar to me. Nevertheless, the full-size trapper from Case, closed, the handle is around 4 1/8 inches. So it's a pretty large knife. A whole lot bigger than this little Stockman. But we're doing this just for reference. In case you have a full-size Case trapper, you can see about the size difference between these two. Another one that would be good to compare because they're so popular these days is going to be the Case Sodbuster Jr. You can see right here that again it's a lot larger than this little small Stockman. That knife's around 3 5/8 inches when closed. Next is the Case Mini Trapper. It's around 3 1/2 inches when it's closed. Now we're getting into our smaller knives. The first one here is Case's 68 pattern. This one's a half Congress. You can see it's got a longer handle, but it's got a shorter blade. Those were the Bolt pattern for 2023. The next one is interesting because it's the only knife that's smaller than this one that I've got. And it's the 01 Senator. It's just a speck smaller. But you can see this is a 2-blade, and you can see that the blade itself is not near as long. But that is a pretty little knife right there, that mother of pearl. It's beautiful. But that's what they call a Senator style knife. Next is going to be the tiny toothpick, which I've been carrying a lot lately. You can see it's got a longer blade and a longer handle, but it's a single blade, and all the blades are going to be thinner on this one. You can see the Stockman has a lot thicker blade, so the blade will be a little stouter. And then lastly, we'll compare the king of small EDCs, in my opinion, the Case Peanut. The Peanut's a 2-bladed knife instead of a 3, and it has half stops, but you can see there, it's got a lot bigger blade. The blade isn't quite as wide, though. But I have noticed that a tendency with Case's as-ground blades is they tend to be a little bit wider than their high mirror polished ones. Also, before I forget, let's throw in a mini Coke bottle. I really like the Case small Coke bottle here. That bone stag makes it want to roll around, but you can see it's a larger knife altogether. Then we've got the mini Copperhead, which again has a lot larger handle and a larger blade, but that's for reference. Now, the last two we're going to compare it to. One of them is going to be the penknife version, and the other one here is going to be a newer version of this Stockman. This one right here is the pen blade version. Now this is the knife I've got from 1991, so it's 1 year older, but it's in Case's brown Delrin instead of their maple. Now that brown Delrin's a classic from Case, and this is one of my favorite knives. When I first got this one, I called it Jimmy Brown for some reason, and that's been its name ever since. But you can see here that the main blade is basically the same thing. Case's nail nick width can vary sometimes. Also, you'll notice that the blade is a little bit wider on the Stockman on the right than it is on the penknife on the left. I think that's purely coincidental. I don't think that happened on purpose. Where these two are going to vary a lot from each other is the Stockman is going to have 2 blades. Well, how can I say it? It's got 3 blades altogether. It's got 2 secondary blades. Where the little pen knife is only going to have 1 secondary. So you can see that this knife is simply missing the sheep's foot. That makes it a little lighter, makes it a little thinner. But you're losing some utility when you give up that little blade. Here you can see the back. You see the one on the left here, the penknife, only has one back spring, where the Stockman has two. Now, that does not hold true today, I do not believe. I believe if you go out and buy a 2025 case 33 pattern penknife, the 6233, I believe it's going to have two springs lined up side by side, kind of the way Case does a canoe. But this is an older one, so it's got a wider blade in there that works both ends. So that is kind of an interesting note. I like both of these a lot, the Stockman and the penknife. I've had the penknife longer, though. Also, I've got this one right here. When I saw this one at a pawn shop, I jumped on it. It had some rust on it, and I just kind of buffed the rust off, but you can still see there's a little bit of pitting. But this right here is just a beautiful, great user knife. Now, this is the exact same knife as this one, aside from the fact that it has brown Delrin handles. Let's compare the back springs, though. You can see that everything looks basically the same. I can't tell much difference. But there's a reason for that. This particular one here, see if I can get it where you can see the stamp. This is a 2001, right? If I'm seeing that right. 2001. Well, somewhere along the line, Case changed the way that they were doing the back springs on the 33 pattern Stockman. And now the center liner is doubled up. There's two brass liners there in the middle, instead of just one going down the center. I'll show you an example with a 44 pattern Stockman. Okay, here's a 44 pattern Stockman. This is a wider Stockman, but it will illustrate the point. See these middle liners here? Can you see that there's two of them lined up together? And so that's how Case is now doing the 33 pattern. They have been doing it for a while. I don't know why they did that, but I don't think it hurts nothing either way, but it is interesting to note. Now these two here, I think, are basically the same. Again, you can see just a speck of pitting on this one, but it's a user knife. Yeah, these are both great knives. Do you all have any experience with the small Stockman or the small pen? If you don't have one, I highly recommend it. If I was you and you could find it for a good price, I'd get one of them, either get the penknife or the small Stockman. They're both beautiful. One that I really like and might get someday if I find it for a good price would be the black Delrin version from Shepherd Hill. Those are really beautiful. But yeah, comment down below how you feel about the small Stockman, how you think it compares to the peanut or the small toothpick or the small Congress, the Coke bottle, any of them you want to. Thank you all so much for watching these videos. Comment down below. Have a good day. Keep your knives sharp.